Story time about why I beat up my best friend. So a little background information. Her and I had been best friends since we were in 7th grade. Her family was rich, mine was poor, and at first she was a really good friend. She was always there for me whenever I needed her, until our freshman year of high school, which is when her and I started hanging out with boys. Now, my mom was kind of strict. She wouldn't really let me hang out with boys, but her mom was more lenient about her hanging out with boys. Every weekend, she would throw a party at her house, and she would throw them in her attic because 1, it was huge, and 2, her parents didn't give a fuck what she did up there. Anyways, she would always offer to do my hair and makeup before the party started, which always made me really excited because I never really put any work into my physical appearance. Well, little did I know, the only reason why she would offer to do my hair and makeup at these parties was so that way she could make me look like shit in front of all the boys. So after that, I taught myself how to do my own makeup and do my own hair, like for part 2. Part 2 about why I beat up my best friend. So like I said, I learned how to do my hair and makeup, and she went on vacation for like a month straight. Well, when she came home, she threw another party, and she was like, don't worry, after I'm done getting ready, I'll do your makeup and do your hair. And I was like, no, it's fine, I got it. She literally looks at me and she goes, are you sure? You don't really know how to do that. Like, it'll probably look really bad. And I'm like, why the fuck would you say that? She goes, no, like, I don't mean it to be rude. It's just that, like, I want you to look good in front of the boys and stuff like that. Like, sis tried to talk me into getting a shower for a full, like, 20 minutes. So after that, the whole night, she's literally being a pick-me girl. She's making all these comments about me in front of the boys, and I just keep brushing them off until her next party. We got ready, and I put on these expensive shoes that I had just bought, and she goes, wow, you just, like, really like to copy my style, don't you? So she starts making comments that whole night about how my family's poor and stuff like that, and she threw up all over my shoes. So I dumped the trash can that everybody had threw up in that night on her, punched her in the face, but like 2 months later, she came to my house and apologized.
Kill my best friend. Story time. Ooh, it feels hella weird saying that. Story time. Story time. Story time. Oh, not the laugh. Okay, anyways, every Friday after our 10+ hour crusty ass shift at work, me and my bestie always go to Chick-fil-A and then we go to Dutch Bros after. So we go to Chick-fil-A, we go to Dutch, we get our food and our drink, and we're feeling real good. I'm driving back and I decide to be quirky, and I'm like, oh my god, let's stop at this lookout spot. Because I wanted to be all cute and be like, oh my god, let's take pictures of the stars. Let's like Stargate. Like, who lets me make decisions? Because bad shit always happens. So I park, and keep in mind, this is on a cliff. We're only sitting there for about 10 minutes, and then all of a sudden, this guy starts charging towards my car. So I notice him, and I scream. I'm like, oh! And then I lock my car, because I don't know if he had a gun or whatever. And then he walks to my car and knocks on the window. And I'm like, oh, hell no, this cannot be happening to me. My friend sitting in the passenger seat laid down, thinking that the guy can't see him. And I'm just staring at this guy like, ooh. As he's staring at me, he puts something up to the window. And I think he's about to shoot us. Ew, I have to make a part 2. I'm so sorry. I almost killed my best friend. Story time. Part 2. So the guy's at my window, right? And he's knocking. I'm just sitting there scared as fuck. Like, oh my god, what the fuck does he want? Like, is he trying to kidnap me? Is he trying to steal from me? Does he want to ride? Does he want to ride? If you know what I mean. And my friend's not being any help. He's just laying there acting like he's invisible. I felt like I was in this alone. So the whole time I'm staring at this guy, I'm just thinking, how the hell am I going to get out of this? Because if I did a 3-point turn, which is how I would have to leave, what if he pulled out his Glock? Like, Jamal, don't pull out the 9. So I made the executive decision to roll down my friend's window. I rolled down my window and asked, sir, do you need help with something? This man really asked, do you need some tree? After he asked me that, I was so relieved. But I was so angry. Like, how did I get so afraid of the local drug dealer? After that, I said no, and then I sped off. And then I almost hit a deer, and then swerved into oncoming traffic, and then swerved right back into my lane. God was testing me that day. I swear to Bob. And that is how I almost killed my best friend.
There was a finger in his trash can. Story time. So I used to house sit for this really rich guy, and we're gonna name him Daniel. Now, Daniel's house was huge. It was basically a mansion. And the cool thing about house sitting for Daniel is that he let me do whatever I wanted to do. He let me use his car, invite friends over, have a party, literally whatever I wanted to do, I could do it. But the only thing I was not allowed to do was go in his basement. And I really didn't think too much about it because he told me that's where his office was, so I figured he just didn't want anybody messing it up. Until the last time I house sat for him, I got a little bit nosy and I went down into the basement. Now the basement was huge. Literally my entire house could fit in his basement. And one thing caught my eye. There was a huge metal trash can in the corner of the basement. And it was kind of creepy. So, unfortunately, I walk over to it, I open up the lid, and I look inside, and the first thing I see right on top is a human finger.
Story time about how I killed my chicken Bucky. So this was when I was 5, and I went to visit my grandparents, and they lived on the farm. When we got there, they surprised me and my sister with chickens. I named mine Bucky. I was a really lonely child back then, so Bucky was my best friend. Me and Bucky did everything together. We watched TV together, we played in the backyard, we read books under our favorite tree, everything. Until one day, it was a really, really warm day in the farm, and I saw Bucky and he looked really, really tired. It was obviously because of the warm weather, so I felt really bad for Bucky, so I started filling up this tub, and I put my rubber ducky in, and everything. I put Bucky in, but of course Bucky couldn't swim because he's a chicken. My sister saw him and started giving him CPR because she wanted to be a doctor. Of course Bucky died, and so did my sister's hopes and dreams of being a doctor.
So this is the real story about how I broke the Big Thunder Mountain ride at Disneyland, or so I thought. So at the beginning of the ride, I pulled out my phone to film, which I do all the time, and none of the workers ever say anything, but this time as we were on the ride, you could hear a lady on the loudspeaker yelling things at us throughout the ride, and this was the only instance I got it audibly on camera. I don't remember what else she said because we were screaming on the ride. I wasn't sure if she was saying things to me or someone else because everyone was faced forward on the ride, so I didn't really know what she was talking about. Anyway, I got really scared because technically you're not supposed to have your phone out. She kept saying things over the loudspeaker until they ended up literally stopping us in the middle of the ride. We were stuck there for about 15 to 20 minutes and they made everyone leave the line, so it got pretty scary because no one was telling us what was going on. Meanwhile, I was convinced I was the reason they stopped the ride because I had my phone out and thought I dropped something on the rails. My friend also kept telling me that I broke the ride, so it was kind of an inside joke that I broke the ride. But finally, some workers came and released us and we had to climb down onto this ramp to get off. But in the end, they gave us all fast passes. They still never told us exactly what happened, but I assume it was because of my juicy fat ass.
Story time about how I came out as bi to my parents. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. By the time I was 12 years old, I definitely knew I was bi. By the time I was 14, I'd already had a girlfriend and a boyfriend, but my parents did not know any of this. When I was 15, I even had a girlfriend for a full year. She would come around the house and I would say that she was my friend. But one day my mom walks in on me and my friend making out on the bed without our shirts on. My mom was so horrified that she actually ran out of the room. Later I explained to her that we were just playing a game and that it was popular at school. I basically convinced her that I was not bi. Or at least I thought I did. Later on that day, my dad comes to my room and basically asked me if I liked girls. I swore up and down that I didn't. Then when I was 16, I found myself having 2 girlfriends, don't ask me how. Again, they would each come over and I would just say they were my friends. I thought I was home alone, so I invited my girlfriend over. We start fooling around and that's when my door opens. My dad is looking at me getting it on with another girl. Part 2 is up. Story. My dad walks in on me while I was fooling around with a girl in bed. Mind you, I'm a girl. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Keep in mind, I had half of my clothes on. My dad literally picked me up from the bed and threw me out of my room. Then he kicked my girlfriend out. It was definitely traumatizing. My dad called my mom and told her to rush home. They interrogated me for 3 hours. I told them I'd had girlfriends and boyfriends. They were more than shocked. They finally calmed down and I was able to go to sleep. 2 days later, my dad tells me to pack my suitcase. I asked him why, but he wouldn't tell me. Then he drove me to a camp that promises to help your children who are bi. Instead of being afraid, I told my dad that I would try my best. I lasted about 2 days there. They basically made us do Bible study, and I was made to feel like a perv. So I packed my little suitcase and I left. So of course, I packed my suitcase, climbed 2 walls, and I was free. That's when I heard a really scary alarm. Part 3 is up. My dad walks in on me while I was I thought I was free, but then I hear an alarm sound. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I started running and I got to a main road. Luckily, a bus was pulling up right on time. I get on the bus and I go straight to my girlfriend's house, which was about 2 hours away. That means they would have already told my parents I had escaped. Well, when I get to my girlfriend's house, my parents are already there. But guess what? My parents weren't there to pick me up. They were there to drop off all of my things. Yep, that's right. They kicked me out of the house. Thankfully, my girlfriend's family were super cool and they let me live with them. When I turned 18, I got an apartment and a roommate. My entire family stopped talking to me. It's been 4 years since I last saw my parents. I recently got hired at my dream job, so I went to my parents' house and I told them. I also came out to them properly. At least this time I was not yelled at. I speak to my mom on the phone every now and then, but I feel like I should talk to my dad again. What do you guys think?
When my daughter was born, she had dark skin and looked like her parents could be of African descent. My husband was furious and accused me of cheating and left right then and there. He told everyone on both sides of the family what happened and wanted a divorce. Then his friends and families all called me to say how upset they were and called me really nasty names. My mother was by my side the entire time as I kept professing my innocence. He refused to pick me up from the hospital, threw my stuff out on the lawn, and changed the locks. When my sister called to get the baby stuff, he texted her a picture of a bare nursery room and said he got rid of everything. He even destroyed my art studio. Eventually, he agreed to do a paternity test, and he was 100% the father. No one could believe this, so he did it again, and he was the dad. One of his cousins did the ancestry thing and found out there was 30% of African in their family. This made Jim's paternal great-grandmother admit to having an affair around the same time Jim's grandfather was born, and because he could pass as hers, she just assumed her husband was the father. Since then, he's been reaching out and everyone has come to apologize. I told him I needed time and he asked to see the baby, and I let him, but I'm too afraid to physically hand her to him. I've never cheated and have been 100% innocent all this time. Am I the asshole for not wanting to give him a second chance?
Story time about how I was dating the school shooter. Yeah. So a little background information. I was a sophomore whenever this all happened. And it was around October. Well, the one day I was sitting at lunch with my group of friends. We're all sitting there having a good time when one of my friends dares me to go over and sit with this one kid. And he was sitting alone. He was kind of shy. And of course I did because they had offered me $10, guys. Can't beat that. So I go over there, we start talking, and I realize that he's actually really nice. And he's really hot. I never really saw what he looked like because he was always wearing hoodies during school. Anyways, we started hanging out more, and eventually he said that he liked me, and we started dating. The relationship seemed pretty perfect. Well, 6 months in, I think he started to trust me more because he had told me about this one group of girls that he absolutely hated. This group of girls just happened to be my friends. I didn't tell him that I was friends with these girls because they were considered controversial. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how I was dating the school shooter. Like I said, I had never told him that I was friends with these girls because they were controversial, but he would go on for hours about how much he hated these girls. He went as far to say that he wanted to kill them. I didn't think anything of it at first because him and I had more of a sarcastic sense of humor, but he started to sound more and more serious every time that he would talk about it. Well, after us dating for 10 months, he calls me the one night and he starts telling me about how he's going to shoot up the school. He had told me his entire plan of how he was going to do this. Now, he must have thought that we were like ride or die relationship, when in reality, I was recording everything that he was saying. After we got off the phone, I wrote an email to all of the office staff in my school, but I fell asleep and never finished the email. I woke up the next morning, finished it. I had texted my friends not to go to school that day. I had already missed the bus. I rode my bike to school that day. I ran to the principal's office. Nobody was there. And that's whenever I heard shots in the hallway.